Hey everyone, this is Jack Milloway with Louisiana Public Health Institute and the HCCN. I just wanted to give a brief introduction. So welcome to the EHS User Group phone call. This month we're going to do something a little different. In the past we've kind of talked about specific issues or workflows inside of the product and how those are working or new features, and then had some people from EHS on the line to answer questions. But this time, just because there's been so many changes in the EHS product lately, we thought it would be great to have Susie Stevens from EHS on the line to give a demo of how the current product is working and what all the features are. There's a question and a chat box that you guys can type any questions into. Let us know if there's any specific workflows that you'd like to have pictures of or specific questions you'd like answered. We've got myself and Doreen and Tonya, I think, are on the line from the PCA. So we've got a lot of HCCN staff, as well as, in addition to Susie, there's a lot of other folks from Greenway that are on this call that are able to answer some of your questions if you have something more in-depth, and we're happy to make those connections afterwards. So with that, I'll kick it over to Susie Stevens and her team at Greenway to give some introductions and talk a little bit about themselves and get this demo started. Thanks all for coming on.
Thanks so much, Jack. Yes, Jack said this is Susie Stevens, and I'm looking forward to walking you through some of the changes in the software, just sort of taking you through a workflow. We do have a couple of other folks on the phone with us as well. Clark Cummings, who I think many of you have probably met, who works down in the Louisiana area. Greg Murchison, who's been with the company for many years, specifically in the FQHC market. And I'm not sure if anyone else has joined us or not, but those are the folks that I know are on the call. Okay, what I want to do is just sort of jump in and sort of walk you through a patient flow, but by means of doing that, sort of showing you some of the changes that have occurred in the system, basically in the last year, because what I find when I'm going out to, meet with different clients and talk to people, that sometimes you may just not have implemented or been aware of some of the changes that have come up. So I'm going to go through and just touch on some of those things. As Doreen had indicated also, if you have questions, please feel free to send her a list of any of those questions that you have, and then she'll actually be relaying those on over to us at this point. Can everyone see my screen okay? Doreen, is everybody hearing and seeing all right?
Yeah, it should be good. Let me know if there are any problems.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, let's start off on the clinical console, and then we'll go from there. Clinical console, I know all of you, I'm sure, are using in one form or another. You're probably aware that with 7.4 and 7.5 and then additional tweaks also in 8.0, what you're seeing in some of the different colors, the different icons have changed dramatically in the last year. Trying just to give it a fresher, more modern look and feel to the application, and going with what are a lot of the industry standards as far as what's supposed to be better for your visual appeal, things like that, to make it easier for you and your providers to use. A couple of things just to remind you about things that you can see on the screen. If you've not yet gone in and started looking at your ribbon configuration, that was something that's been added in the last year that allows you to take off any of the icons on any of these ribbons at the top of the screen that a particular user or a group of users may not need. So I can go in and make ribbon configurations back over in security under the user profiles and say, for all my nurses, these are the options I want them to have. If I need to do it for an individual or allow the individual, of course, to come in here and do it themselves, this is where they would come into the ribbon configuration, and then they can go in and select any of the individual ribbons and turn on or turn off the different icons that they're seeing at the top of the screen. So if you haven't gone in and explored this, this is something you may want to take a look at, because it does allow you, basically what I say is just clean up a lot of the clutter, things that have always been there and maybe you just didn't need. This now allows you to go in and remove some of those things directly off of the menus there for you. Okay. Now also, a couple of other things that you can do. You can also change the order that the different tasks are presented to the individual user. So for instance, if I said, you know, medical messages here, I really would prefer it to be down here under my medications. I can just drag and drop that option down to where it's more appropriate as an individual. I can say, you know, this is the order that I prefer it to be in, so just by holding it and dragging it, I can put it in the appropriate spot. Just a lot of things like that that we've been working on just to try to make the screens easier for you to see, less clutter, and easier to move around in. Also, if you're using the chart, on the chart preferences, I'm sure probably most of you have done this as well, you do have the option to now determine what are the different preferences of how you want the information to be presented on the face sheet. Also, I stopped here at the patient alerts. If you're not aware of this, this is something also that was added in 8.0. If you do not want to have the patient alerts warning pop up, you now have the option over in the system administration, well, under security, to go in and turn that off. And I'll show you where that is in a moment as well. But you do have those options. And of course, the patient notes are now popping up for you as well. But the chart preferences, if you want to change the order of the information that's being presented on the face sheet, this is where you would go in to do so. So I could determine what are the columns that I want to see on the left-hand side of my face sheet, what are the things that I want to see on my right-hand side, and we have added a couple of new things. One is Greenway Community. And some of y'all may already be familiar with the community. That's a new product that we're rolling out that does some of the risk management, care coordination, risk stratification for any of those new MIPS programs or the macro requirements for things that you're wanting to manage different populations. And so you do have a couple of different options that have been added, one for Greenway Community and one for care programs. So you do have that option to see those. And if you've got those turned on, then you can decide where on your screen you would like those things to appear. On the Greenway Community, what you'll be able to see are the care gaps and the risk score and the when those were last updated. And on the care programs, you would just see the names of the care programs that that patient is participating in. Okay, well, let's jump over and let's just sort of take a patient through a workflow so that I can point out to you some of the different changes that are going on throughout the system. We'll start off by just jumping over to the scheduling. Now, I know everybody's very familiar with the scheduling screen itself, you know, rules-based, enterprise, turn the colors on, turn the colors off, those different types of things that you might want to be able to do. But also I wanted to point out, if you hadn't noticed, that you do have a new option for last seen right on the screen when you're going in to schedule the appointment. Now, of course, you've always been able to do that by going to appointment history, you know, by right-clicking on the patient's name, but we've also added this last seen as well, so you now have the ability to see that from here. Now, also when you're scheduling appointments, something else we've added specifically to accommodate some of the needs of behavioral health, or for some of our FQHCs that are doing group sessions, maybe nightly classes, AA type meetings, things like that, where they needed the ability to be able to schedule in groups, and then also the ability to check in that group as a whole, because maybe I'm working that group by myself just as a counselor tonight, and I got 20 patients and I just want to check them all in at once. So we did add the multi-patient check-in functionality. And in addition to that, we also give you the ability to apply a multi-patient note, so that if I have a general therapy note that needs to be applied to all 20 people in the group, I can do that at one time, and then I could go back to each individual and add notes, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. So I just wanted to point out here in scheduling that you do, you know, have the ability to schedule by those groups, and then back over on the appointment view that you're looking at here, of course, you would be able to see, and you can have as many different types of group sessions. I just named it group session 1 hour, but yours might be, you know, AA meeting, or it may be, you know, smoking type class or depression, whatever the different topics may be. Okay, so let's say that we wanted to go and check in all of those patients. I could go into the system and say I want to check in that group, and I'm just using my standard Windows type functionality, holding down the shift key there to select multiple patients. Then I would come up to the top and say I want to do a multi-patient check-in, and it says, okay, these are the 3 that you're saying you want to check in. Is that accurate? And then I would just say okay, and they've all been checked in at that point. If I then wanted to go in and apply a standard note to all of those patients, the first time that I go into medicine, I would just select the individual patient, and let's just go and say I'm going to take, we'll take Inglewood here. Let's go in and say that we want to go in and put in our standard note, and I'm just going to put something basic in here, but let's say that we just wanted to go in and do just a basic therapy type note where I want to go in and put my notes in. So I'm just putting in a general note that applies to all patients in the group. And you can put in as much detail, of course, as necessary. And I've just pulled up one that had a SOAP format, but you could have had just a basic box that you're typing that detail in. So you would detail in whatever information. Okay, and then what the system's doing, as you well know, is beginning to create that progress note. But then I have the option to come up here and say, I want to apply that note to multiple patients. And it knows that I have 2 other patients that were checked into that same group section. And then it shows me here what information is going to automatically copy over to the other patients. You notice that I had a current condition or problem. It's not going to copy that because that was specific to that patient. The same would be true if it had brought in, if you have it set to bring in medications automatically or things like that. But I can say go ahead and copy that note over, and then that each of those other patients now has that subjective and plan already added to their record. But then if I needed to, like, say something individually about what happened with this patient today, I could go in and add some additional notes. Maybe I want to talk about with their mood, they seem to have a lot of anxiety today, and I can customize the note for that individual patient. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that capability while we were thinking about that as far as the scheduling is concerned. So you do have that new group scheduling functionality, group check-in, and group note process that just streamlines that for any of your behavioral health or group sessions that you may be doing. Okay. All right, let's go back over again to our we scheduled a patient for an appointment. Let me walk you through checking in a patient just to show you a couple of other small changes over on the check-in screen as well. From the check-in, I'm sure all of you are aware also that there's some new UDS and government requirements that you need to be tracking your gender and transgender. So with the 8.0 release, we did roll out that additional question functionality for both sexual orientation and the gender status to match up with your requirement for your government reporting. We've also added the new View HHA history down here. So this just gives you the ability to go in and view that change history, where before you would have to print that in order to view the history. Now you can do that directly on the screen. So this does give you the ability to see those changes that before you had to go in and actually print it out in order to see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else here I wanted to point out to you on the check-in. Care programs, I don't know if any of y'all are working with assigning patients to care programs yet, but you do have the care programs option, and if you are involved with any care coordination or care programs out there, this is where you would go in and associate the patient to the appropriate care program that they're participating in. Couple of other things, and of course I've got mine set up to prompt me to collect and also to require comments. So I've got mine turned on that way. Those are options that you can turn on or turn off. While we're talking about household assessment, and everybody's probably already aware of the questionnaire functionality, but since this popped up, this is not something real new, but something you may not have used in the past. You do have the ability to have some different questionnaires that the system will automatically prompt you on, and it's going to look at those clinical event manager rules to tell you if there's something due for this patient. And then the patient could sit, at a PC, or you could hand them a tablet and they could actually complete the questionnaire, or it can be pushed to the patient portal as well. So you do have a couple of options there. But I wanted to show you another change as far as household assessment is concerned. Again, this is probably something you're already dealing with, because I know y'all live and breathe this every day. But over in the practice configuration under the household assessment, to accommodate for the changes in the household assessment poverty level calculations that the government has made this year, you do have the new assessment utility that has been changed to accommodate for the different additional member income based on the different poverty levels that they've given us now. That I think it's what, 4150, 4160, something like that for each additional member. So instead of having a flat number, it now is different based on the total number of members in the household. So that has been added for you as well. Tell you what, while we're over here in system administration, let's look at a couple of other things real quick. A couple of other changes that we've made over here. Let's see. If we go into the security section, let's say that we want to configure by user. And let's come down to the miscellaneous section. I just wanted to show you, you do have now a new button for add orders, so that I could restrict someone from the ability to add orders to the patient's record. So that is something that has changed just slightly. I don't know if that really affects anybody on this call, but just wanted to point that out to you. You also now have the ability to disable the messages, the alerts pop up that we talked about, and that's something that you would do over, if we go into, sorry, wrong one, user preferences configuration. You can go in and do those by going into like the medicine preferences. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. The medicine preference, I'll show you the auto import in just a sec, but just under the general preferences is where you can go in to disable the patient alert prompt in chart. We just had some folks that said they do not like getting the alert pop-up, so if you, turn that off, then they're going to stop getting that alert. On the medicine, though, one additional change we made there, for any of you that may have residents or providers that require supervision, you can now auto-import the supervising provider for the mid-level automatically into the medicine notes, and that would tie back to whether you had set them as a mid-level that required supervision back over in the individual provider tables. Another thing I was just going to point out to you also, let me not save those changes, over on the miscellaneous configuration, we also have a new option for requiring the immunization details. If you turn that on, it is going to require the dosage, the UOM, the site, and the method. That's just preparing us for the new meaningful use 3 measures, preparing because we're expecting that they're going to start requiring some additional information to make sure that it goes cleanly to the registries, and also the potential that we're going to have bidirectional as well. So there are some that if you want to go in and make those required, then you can go in and do that, but it will stop the user and require them to enter that information if you turn that on at this point. Any questions so far, Doreen? Let's say if I want to go through and...
We're good so far. But just a note for everyone, this is being recorded, so we'll post it or send it out later.
Okay. Okay, so we just had the one question. Perfect. Okay, I just want to stop. If there's questions that I'm not hearing you, please jump in there and tell me. I appreciate it. One other thing while we're over in system administration, and this is not something that has been added in the last couple of releases, but I do find that a lot of folks have maybe just not started utilizing the management reports. So I wanted to come over here and point out to you the management reports. If you have never taken advantage of these, or if you don't have them turned on, that would just be a security preference and giving the rights to who needs to see these. But this does give you the ability to go in and do some productivity reporting by the individual users. So if I wanted to, for instance, to be able to go in and say, well, I want to see user performance. Maybe I think that, Susie's not doing things as well as she should. I could come in here and say, well, I want to go back all the way to 2014, and I'm going to go in and pick the first date. I picked 2015, and go through to today and see what her activity levels have been. So I could go through and pick out that user. Go pick out myself here and go in and say, I want to see how she's doing. And if there were multiple users, I could pick multiple at the same time. But I can go in then and perform that search, and the system will go out and tell me some things like, number of dates that she was entering data during that period, the averages, how many visits, rejected claims, rejections that she worked, refiled claims. So for some of your productivity measures, you may want to take a look at some of these different types of things. Then you can also do daily comparisons. So you would see, well, she's doing well on Mondays, but by the time Friday gets here, she's way downhill after that. Total comparison, and then averages. If you were comparing multiple users, then you could actually see them plotted on top of each other. You also have your collection ratio, and this is where we're getting in looking at, how are the folks doing at collecting at the time of service, making sure that, we are collecting appropriately there. So let me go up and we'll grab my user here again as well. So I'm just going to select mine. And then I can go back again and select, however far back you want to go in order to do that. And then we can just end it as of today or the end of the month. And then I can go in and ask the system to look, how are you doing at a certain financial group, at a certain level, location, or to show me how this user does both at check-in and charge entry. And it'll tell me then, the different patients that I interacted with, 82, what percentage of same-day collection am I doing, previous collection balances or previous balance collection, so that if the patient had an old balance, how is this user doing at collecting that, same-day balances, same-day collection, previous, and it just gives you some good information to know how is your staff doing at collecting at the time of service. So you do have that type, but just some different types of productivity type reports that you may want to go in and take a look at. Okay. All right, let's see. Try to just look through my notes here of things that we may not have talked about yet. And if there's specific areas that someone wants to go to, please, send a question over, Dorian, and we'll certainly go in different directions as well.
Susie, Tonya had a question. She wants to know, are the customizations personalized per clinician or universal for the organization?
Customizations to the clinical console?
I think so.
Okay. Over in the security, if you'll come back over to the user preferences, I can go into a role, and I can come in like to the ribbon configuration, and I can make that customization then for all nurses, all doctors, all front desk. So I can go in and make those types of customization to the ribbon configuration across the board. Then I also can go in and do some things like on the chart preferences where, I want to go in any of these different things. All of these different options, I can go in and make those apply to a role rather than to an individual. So any of these different things, I can go in and set up my chart preferences while I'm deciding what's going to be on the right, what's going to be on the left. Of course, then you may leave them the option to be able to change that on their own as an individual, but it does give me the ability to say for certain types of roles how those screens should look. Is that the question that was being asked? I want to make sure I'm answering the right thing there.
Yeah, Tony, just send me a message if you have any follow-ups or anything. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, that's where you would go in there. Now, under the user definitions is where you assign the different profiles of what's going to appear on the right-hand column for the new chart. so that if I didn't want, maybe I look at this and say, you know, we don't even use the P&G, and this person wouldn't be doing this, and they wouldn't be doing that. Any of the things that I don't want them to see on their columns going down the right-hand side of the chart, and I'll go point that out here in just a moment, I can remove, and then I can apply that at a profile level. So I could create a profile, and I can then go and assign that profile to each individual user that it needs to apply to. And so that's where, if we're looking over here, back over on the patient, if we were looking at that patient's chart, those are the different tabs that are going down the right-hand column here. So any of those changes can be made at the profile level, and then the profile applied to as many different users. Now, if the user chooses to make any changes to the screen layout, so let's say as an individual, I decide that I don't need all this information, and I want to come in and, for instance, take off the, I don't know, we'll say I don't need to see the appointment info. So I can come over and uncheck any of those columns. Now that is a change that only applies to the user that's logged in. Now, and also remind your staff, if they're ever going to make those changes, to make sure they come up and exit properly, or it will not save those changes. So if I've made any individual changes to the way my columns are laid out, or to, you know, the way the screen is set up here, Xing out at the top will not save those changes. You always need to come over and make sure you hit the exit. Okay? Now, something else I wanted to go briefly through with you as well are the care plans. You know, this is something that started rolling out last fall with 7.4, and then we added some additional capabilities in 7.5 as well. If you have not started using the care plans, I just want to make sure you know that those are available to you here. And the care plans are where you can go in and set up in the background different types of care plans that you may want to track on patients. Hey, Dorian, would you mind asking the question if people would like to see how to set one up? I can do so, or I can just talk about it here at a high level. And I'll continue talking, but if you'll ask if they want to see the setup, I'll be happy to go to that as well. But basically what a care plan allows you to do is to go in and say, here's some things I need to track. Like this is one I just said was my standard adult female care plan, my health maintenance type screen. I want to look at their blood pressure. I want to look at their height, their weight, their BMI calculation, tobacco, LMP, pap smear. What are the things I want to just in general be able to see at a glance how the patient is doing on certain items? So I've set up this general health maintenance screen, and the way that I set up this care plan is I didn't want to see it for every date of service. I wanted to see the last 3 occurrences or last 4 occurrences of each individual item. So you'll notice that some of these have different dates on them. That's because the last time that I asked this question for smoking was on 11/19 and again on 12/9.
Susie, it's Jack. We did get a comment that, yeah, we would like to see how to set one up. So.
Okay. Perfect, perfect. Okay, let's jump over that and do that, and then we'll see what the result of it is here. To go in and set one up, you would go into System Administration, into the Clinical Configuration, and the same tool that we were previously using to set up the flow sheet is the tool that we also now use to do the care plan configuration, because a lot of the options are the same. It's just the care plan has more that you can do with it. So let's go in and say we want to do a new one, and we're just going to go in and say this is going to be called Susie's Test Plan, okay? But you would go in and name the plan, and then if I were setting up a flow sheet, I would just switch back over to flow sheet, or if I'm doing a care plan, I'll select care plan. Now, under the view type, there's 2 different view options that you have on the care plan screen. One of them is an encounter view that's going to give me a column for every date of service for which the patient has been seen. Whether that particular item was documented on that day or not, I'm going to see a column for each date of service. So if I had done the blood pressure on Monday, patient comes back on Wednesday, I didn't do it, it would be a blank on the column for that Wednesday, but the column would exist. Now the custom view is like the one I was showing you a moment ago, where instead of having an encounter view where I see a date of service for every visit, the custom view allows me to only see the last 3 occurrences of that particular finding. So you can decide when you're setting up the flow sheet, how does it make sense based on the type of flow sheet I'm documenting or I'm going to want to be looking at right now. You also have the option to associate items to a problem, where I can say this particular care plan is only going to be linked to a certain excuse me, to a certain ICD code or a group of ICD codes. So for instance, if this was something I was doing just for diabetics, I could say this is going to be problem specific. And if I select care plan on a patient who's diabetic, it's going to pop up and say, hey, I've got a care plan for diabetics. Do you want to use it? So it will prompt you based on the problem that that patient has. The other option is just to manually link the care plan based on the provider's own request or requirements. So we'll say this one's going to be manual at this point. And notice also, if you did the problem, though, it does say I'm only looking for patients who's been diagnosed with a certain problem within a certain time frame. So you do have the ability to say, I don't want somebody that was had diabetes 10 years ago. I only want the ones that, were documented recently. Once you've done that, then you decide which are the areas that you want to have included for tracking on your particular care plan. You have the options to pull in orders, medications, vitals, or any medicine findings, not just and any medicine findings as well. So let's say that we want to pull in a path lab note, and notice I can pull in the note associated with it, or I can say what I want to do is the path lab itself. And if I go in and pick one, let's say I want to do an 83036, we'll just go and pull up an easy one. And so when I select that, I'm going to be able to go in then and say, okay, that's the one that I want to be able to do. Then I also could go in and pull in individual components within that lab as well. So if it had additional lab values, different components underneath that, you'd also have the ability to pull those in. Let's say in addition to that, I also want to pull over a procedure, and I'm going to say that I want to pull over my CSR here, which is just a client status review. It says here are a whole bunch of different questions that you have available on that particular one, and then I could go in and say these are the questions that I want to have included. So you can go in and pull any of the different types of orders. I also can pull in any medications. Maybe I'm wanting to see medications on the patient as well. Maybe in addition there's some vitals I want to include, and maybe I want to pull in the weight of the patient. And then in addition to that, I also want to be able to go in and say I'm looking for a particular medicine finding. So all of the different medicine objects that are inside of all those medicine templates that you guys use, I could go in and say, well, the one I'm wanting to do was, I don't know, I'm just going to pick something here. I want to include that as part of my care plan. So at this point, we've gone in, we've associated all the different things that we're wanting to include, and then we've created a care plan. And then you would associate that care plan to any users that would need to have that option for it. And then when you get back over to the care plan section and you're ready to use that for a patient, you would just click on care plan, and then you would be able to see the different factors that you want to include. Now, a patient may have multiple care plans. I may say, well, they're going to have the adult maintenance one, but in addition to that, I want my standard CSR type survey to come in, and I want to see the responses of the entries that my staff has made for each one of those questions. You're not actually entering the data here, of course. This is just a display of the data that was captured as the patients were seen. Now, you also have the ability to say, I want to add free text to this one. So I want to have an option to say, this is where I'm going to put in my notes, and I do want to be able to type in. Sorry. I do want to type in, do whatever I want to here on typing in notes. So I do have the ability to add free text notes. I also maybe say, well, for this patient, there's an additional component that I need to follow as part of this care plan. So maybe I go in and say, I want to add an additional value, and then it would add that particular value to my care plan for today. I also may want to identify different goals or different instructions that I'm providing to the patient. So I could come in here and say I want to add a goal. I want the patient to lose weight. And the due date on this is going to be, the 1st of September, so I could put in a date. Or I could say, 8 weeks. And then the status, how are they doing on that particular item? And I can say, well, they seem to be improving. Maybe I also want to add some instructions. I want them to do a low-carb diet, low-cal in addition, so I can go in and put my instructions. Then I can go ahead and save those. And if I want to make those notes part of my medicine note for today, I would just click on those options here. Also, if I want to identify, maybe I just came in and reviewed the care plan, I can just go ahead and click that. And then also I can go to different areas of the patient's chart from here as well. If I needed to print the care plan, I do have the option just to say print everything that's on there, or maybe I just want to go in and do a couple of things. I don't want all of it, I just want a particular one, and I do want to include the goals, but I don't want to include this, so you can go in and tell it what you want to include on that printed document. Questions on that?
Hey, Susie, we did have one question about that, which is, it seems like there's a lot of different ways you could set them up. Does EHS or you have any examples of different care plans kind of already set up, like what one might look like for diabetes or something like that good practices could use as an example?
Let me check. I don't personally have some, but we can check and see if there's some out there that maybe support has that or training has utilized.
Great, yeah, that'd be awesome. And then also it sounds like even internally inside of our EHS user group, y'all, if anyone out there has a template or screenshot of an example of a care plan that they're currently using, we'd be happy if you guys would send us a screenshot of just the template. We could distribute it to the other members just so other people can see how we're all currently using this feature. So yeah, if anyone has anything, feel free to email it to me or Doreen, and we can make sure that that's available as well.
That's great. Thanks, Jack. Yep. Now you can, if you wanted to see the history of the plans, you can go in and see any previous plans that the patient has had, so you do have the option to go in and select those. And there's also an option in preferences if you want the care plan to auto-complete itself if the diagnosis is resolved. So if a patient had been diagnosed with, obesity, and now we say, okay, we've gotten them through that, if I go in and resolve that problem, then the care plan can be automatically closed if you've selected that preference. So that's an option that you've got as well. Questions on that?
Okay. No other questions right now.
Okay, perfect. Well, those are pretty much sort of the highlights that I had wanted to go over with you of some of the different type things that you probably have already been seeing in your system, but maybe have not actually started working on. There are some other changes in the system that are maybe more specific to certain areas, such as if I've got any folks that are doing Rhine-White, you probably noticed that there's been some changes in your Rhine-White type screens where you do now have the additional transgender field, some of that type information that's been brought in. Of course, you had most of that already here. You do have some additional RSR reporting, and you have a multiple select where you can do and I don't have it turned on to show you here, but you can do a group assignment. You can do a bulk assignment of some different things in there as well. So if you are a Rhine-White facility, there were some additional changes that have occurred in the last I can't remember if they were 7.5 or 8.0, that may affect you there as well. So you might want to just take a look at that if you are a Ryan-White facility. There were also a few small changes that were made on the ACOG as well. I know, like ounces, I think before you were limited to 2 digits. That's been expanded up to 4. A couple of other small changes that have occurred over on the antepartum record portion, that ACOG, that may or may not affect you, just depending on whether you're using that type functionality. General questions. I'll just see if anybody wants to shoot a question over to Jack, and we'll be happy to try to answer those for you.
Hey, Susie, we've had a couple questions come in. One, I think, is more general to everyone else on the line, less so than directly to y'all. But Roger wanted to know if anyone in Louisiana has been using e-prescribing with scheduled drugs. I'm not sure where the legislation is on that at this point, so Roger had asked the question. If anyone is, feel free to type in. And then, Susie, the other question we had was, we had a request to kind of go over that recommended workflow for the group visits again.
Okay.
And then we just got a new one, which was, is there a way to import your problem list diagnosis into your super bill? So I don't know which of those two questions is easier for you to tackle first, but.
Okay. Well, let's start with the ERX question. That definitely was addressed to the group, so I'll let anybody else, respond to you on that. I just wanted to point out it is available, of course, in the system. So if anybody needs to sign up for that additional, narcotics e-prescribing, of course, there are some certain requirements. You have to have that additional security function, either through a fob or like receiving an alert on your phone with a unique code that you log in when you're doing those types of prescriptions. But the functionality exists in the software. It's just a matter of if the capability for each state. Some states have gone ahead and, started it, and others have not. But let's go back over for that group scheduling thing again. So let's go back over and I'll show you that. First of all, you would have to have a group appointment type set up. Okay, and that's just naming it. It doesn't matter. I mean, I could use just my standard new patient as well, so it's not a matter of it having a special functionality, but I'm going to need to have everybody associated with the same type of appointment type in order to select them as a group. So I'm just going to say I want everybody in group meeting A. So I'm going to go in and put a couple of different people into that appointment group. So now I've got 2 different members of that particular appointment group. So to check them in when those patients then actually arrive and I'm ready to start my group, I would see them listed back over on my console, and I would just use either my shift key to select individual members of that group, or I can just go in and select the one. So I'm going to go in and say I want to do both of these 2. And then up here at the top, I do multi-patient check-in, and it'll show me everybody that's been selected with that group meeting A. Because there could have been 10 people, and I realized that only 8 have shown up, so I could just select those ones. So it says these are the 2, and I say, yep, those are the ones I want to do. So it does allow me to see that I've checked in 2 patients at that point. Then when I go into medicine, so let's say that we're ready then to start doing the documentation, I'm going to go into medicine and then see all of this stuff that's already on here for the patient. When I set up that group note, I don't want any of this other stuff, so the system's already been built in with the logic to know that it shouldn't bring in other types of information. So I'm just going to show you, but let's go in and say that, let's go create something of a note here just so you can see. And I'm just going to type in some notes. And you could use any of the different templates. So this is just where you're going to go in and put in notes. So I'm just going to type in some gibberish here just so you can see what it's doing. Also notice if you wanted to have a start time and a stop time. So I could say, well, we started at 9 o'clock and we finished at 9:45. So if I just wanted to put in a duration time, so any of the different things, I mean, you know how to use medicine templates. So I could go in and say some general information there. Then when I go in, and you'll see the note that I've captured so far for that patient, so I can go into the multi-patient note, and it says these are the things. I only have one patient that's in addition to the one I have. You see the notes, the general objective, the duration. So all of that information will now be copied over to every other patient, in this case just Mr. Eastwood, within that group. So if I say copy note, and then let's go over and grab Mr. Eastwood now, and let's go into medicine on him, and you see all of those notes automatically populated. Did that answer the question there?
If that didn't answer your question, go ahead and let us know if there's any follow-up stuff. Yep, he said that did answer his question. So yeah, thank you, Susie.
Sure, no problem. And remind me what my third question was. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Is there a way to import your problem list diagnoses into your super bill?
Yes. I mean, those are settings that you would just need to set up. I mean, you have individual preferences that you can go into. So if I understand correctly, they're saying, you know, if I've made a selection in medicine, do I want to auto-import information? So import the current problem list, things like that. So depending on how you've set up the templates themselves, will determine what information is going to be pushing back and forth. But yes, the superbill can push to medicine, and medicine can push to the superbill. So for instance, let me just pull up a patient here. Let's say I go into this medicine note, and I'm going to pull up a form that I know I have some things already set up in. So like when I come over to the test, I've already told it in the background that, you know, the CPT codes associated with that, and I'm just going to go ahead and read it here. Also, like when I come over and say I inject that heel, it knows what the appropriate code is in the background. So any of that type, and let's go ahead and pull a diagnosis, but there is some setup in the templates themselves that you'll need to have in order to do that. So I have a couple of diagnoses. I've got an x-ray. I did that injection. So now if I go to the super bill for this patient, when I come over there, it tells me there's my diagnosis that have automatically pushed through and the different orders that have pushed through as well. Did that answer the question?
I'll let you know when they type back in. Let us know if that didn't answer your question or if you have any. Yep, she said that answered her question.
Okay,
and
good.
Then we had two more. One was, are there any background setting ups for those multi-patient notes? Anything else that's kind of that would need to be on the back end or in the admin list or anything that would need to be set up to enable that feature?
No, just other than making sure that you have the capability, you know, turned on for that user, that the icon is available, but it really doesn't require any setup. You'll just, well, the only setup, I mean, would be your appointment type, that you'll need to go in and say, you know, I'm going to have a smoking class, and I'm going to have, you know, a weight loss class, and then assign the users to that appointment type. So you would need to have an appointment type available for the provider that's doing the group.
Great, thanks. And then the last question we have so far is there an updated UDS medicine form in the medicine form library? I'm assuming that's referring to for the new UDS 2016 guidelines.
I don't know. I'll have to ask. Yeah, I'll ask if there's an updated medicine form. I'm not sure. That's not something I really do.
All right, well, cool. That's all the questions we have right now. I'll pose it to the group, is there anything else that anyone would like to see, especially related to something like meaningful use? I know that that always comes up and is an issue. If anyone has any questions about that, just let us know. Additionally, if anyone thinks of something afterwards or talks to one of their colleagues about this and realizes there was something else that they kind of wanted to know but we didn't have time for, feel free to send me or Doreen or Christine at the LPCA emails. We're happy to follow up with Susie and the rest of the Greenway team to answer any questions or get any follow-up stuff. Or if anyone else has any general EHS questions, let us know, and we're happy to work as a connecting factor and try and get you in touch with someone on with Susie or someone on her team. But Susie, is there anything else, or Clark or anyone else? Do y'all want to have anything to say?
Those were the things that I was thinking to show, but I mean, I'll be happy to go in any direction. And if somebody else has a question, I'll certainly attempt to answer anything.
Susie, I know one thing that we haven't been asked about on this phone call, but I know has come up in times past, was especially with meaningful use for access to the patient portal, that way to set it up for people that don't have an email address. Do you know the feature I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you've gone in and... Yeah, in the patient's demographic, you do have the ability to say that if they don't have an address, you can just give them, I don't actually have a portal attached to this database to be able to show you, but you can actually go in, you can indicate that they don't have an address, but you no longer have to go in and set up the portal feature for them. So you do have the option, like under privacy and consent, to indicate that the patient's indicated they don't have an email, you know, so, or they've declined to give you one, if that's something you want to keep track of. But instead of having to go to the portal and set up the user, that's no longer necessary. So that's not something you have to do. And then you can tell them that you're going to, you invited them to the portal, and then just give them the instructions on how to go in and log themselves in.
And
is that what you were referring to?
Yeah, and then that puts them in the numerator for your meaningful use, right?
That you've invited them to the portal, correct.
Cool, thank you.
Yes.
Well, yeah, that's all the questions and everything we've gotten. So I think if there's nothing else, Clark, do you have anything to say? Susie, any last words? Or otherwise, I think we're done. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for being on today, and please use this as a resource if we can help out at all. I went through the list. I think we may have one or two folks that are not currently on the system, so if we can answer any questions further or set up a demo or have further discussions with you guys, please reach out to us. And once again, you guys are a really valuable partner of ours, and once again, thanks for letting us speak to you today. And Susie, once again, you were awesome, and I appreciate you being on here and doing this for us.
No problem. Just let me know if y'all have any more questions.
Yeah, thanks so much, Susie, and thank you, Clark. And with that, thanks everyone for jumping on. We'll get this posted sometime soon onto the LPCA, HCCA section, and we'll let y'all know when that gets posted so you can share it with your colleagues and with anyone else who wasn't able to be on here. So thanks so much for your time, and we'll talk to you later.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys.
Everybody have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.